Thanks for joining us. I'm here with Nick Baldetti, who is the health officer for the Reno County Health Department. He's been guiding our community through this crisis, through COVID-19. This is a couple of conversations that Nick and I have had, and he's just taken precious time. And Nick, I just want to say again publicly what a fabulous job that you're doing and bringing us information and clarifying. And so I wanted to take just a moment, just right as we, particularly for churches, as we come into Easter and we're trying to make sure we got our minds around what we're supposed to be doing. And I think most of us now understand social distancing and that we're in this stay-at-home, shelter-at-place order issued by the governor. Maybe just kind of recap that again, what that might mean, and then I'll ask questions as we go through.
Yeah, so we're still under the aspect of guidelines for social distancing, using our best judgment in terms of social gatherings. So social distancing, again, being that 6-foot bubble around us. Limiting gatherings, the governor just came out with a new executive order yesterday, which supersedes 20-14, and basically it's just tightening up some of the language around limiting gatherings to 10 and under in public settings, and then again reiterating the 6-foot bubble, no more than 10 minutes within that 6-foot bubble if you absolutely have to, and then proper hygiene and respiratory etiquette. So continually washing your hands, practicing good hygiene practices is then. And then that respiratory etiquette, using your elbow to cough, washing your hands immediately after. If you use a tissue, washing your hands immediately after that, things of that nature.
Seems to be working. I mean, we're having some sort of results by just doing what we're told. So kind of encourage us to do that.
Yeah, preliminarily, it's still very, very early to tell, unfortunately, but at the same token, kind of where we're at in terms of the tip of the spear, if you will, is that we seem to be having some impact in flattening the amount of positive cases that we're seeing.
But in my understanding, by listening to some conversations, is though this is a special week for a lot of people, particularly churches, this is not a time to back off. This is a time to stay real diligent in following those directions. And I think that's kind of what one of the things the governor was kind of aiming at is let's stay diligent in this process.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is, for many, this is a very important week in religious belief. It's Holy Week. Easter is this weekend. But exactly that, unfortunately, for our state specifically, many of our new clusters of positives has been associated with religious gatherings.
Right.
And so just as much in terms of legally shoring up some of the language in the newest gubernatorial order, at the same token, it's as much of an ancillary communication of now's not the time to loosen up the grip on the reins here.
Right.
Because if we do that too soon, what we don't want to see is a resurgence.
A real risk.
Yeah, and then we get a double bounce kind of a scenario going on.
I know for myself and other ministers in town, what we really stated is that if we really want to love our neighbor, we stay distant right now. That this Easter is a time to do this very differently. And appreciated the governor clarifying the 10 and under for people that were doing some online work, that kind of thing. And she clarified some drive up. She also clarified not passing offerings and elements, and she got real clear. I'll make sure we get that online and make sure we see that. The other thing I think we've had questions over, Nick, is the self-reporting form. I have had questions like, okay, now do I do this locally? Do I do this through my doctor? What does that mean? How does that affect my employment? Is that taking the place of something? Maybe might clarify. I've heard you talk about that's to help broaden our information more than anything.
Yeah.
But
so really the environment as we know it really is still that we're beholden to an inventory shortage that we have in terms of testing capacity.
Right.
Now, private laboratories, I think since the last time we spoke, private laboratories have been able to better infuse themselves into the testing capacity as the state, and so we are about 75% now of positive COVID-19 tests positive COVID-19 cases in Kansas have been confirmed by private testing, which is a good thing. It means that we're beginning to see an increase in the capacity. But it's still contingent upon those private physicians writing the order to test, meaning that you would have to go see your PCP and then that physician swab you for testing. Again, even up to this point, there's a large swath of our populations based off of testing protocol historically, since really this began to ramp up in the tail end of February, that have been asked to maybe just go home and self-isolate because they present the symptomology that is concurrent with COVID-19, but they haven't officially been tested. And so one of the catalyzers for the self-reporting form is that Reno County specifically, we've now had our second case where the vector of infection is unknown, meaning that's usually indicative of community spread. And as such, in the absence of laboratory confirmation testing and capacity, the next best thing from an epidemiological perspective is to ask constituencies to self-report. And then it's completely voluntary and it's confidential. And so the actual report form itself, you can put your name, your address, your phone number. Again, it's completely confidential, but the use of that is for our disease investigation team to conduct the epidemiological investigation, to vet that symptomology in terms of your timeline, exposure, and then if we elevate that self-report form, if we believe that there's evidence enough to suggest a suspected COVID-19 positive, then we can make that specific referral to a PCP and request for that testing as well. And so it just creates, again, in the absence of the actual laboratory testing capacity that we have as a state and as a county, it creates another metric for us to try and get a better quantitative handle on
what's happening,
threshold in our community.
Seemed like it made a lot of sense just in helping our local understanding of what's going on. Now some of those, that form is renogov.
Yeah, so if you go to renogov.org and right on the front page is a COVID Information Center. It's built right into our webpage. You should be able to click it, and it's embedded there, as well as if you follow Reno County Emergency Management or Reno County on social media, particularly on Facebook, it's there. It's just an online form. Should be real easy
to follow.
Yeah, it's intuitive. Should be pretty simple.
We'll put that on the bottom of the screen so that they can follow through that. Some of those self-reporting. So on that form, that form asks some questions about some symptoms that maybe we haven't seen before. Maybe they're a little more in depth than before. Some folks, is that alarming? Is there a reason for that? Just trying to clarify some things.
Yeah. So it most certainly isn't to be alarming. Again, this is a novel virus, and so not only is it an aspect of we're trying to both vet and differentiate some of the symptomologies. I mean, again, we're already in upper respiratory season, cold and flu season. In addition to, we have this novel virus. Plus, we're in the spring, so allergies are going to be up and ramping up for people as well. So not only is is kind of the spread of symptoms, both from an aspect to help vet us to triangulate whether this has the potentiality of being COVID-19 or not. But then also, more so on the back end, if we, this is more epidemiological in nature, in that we might be able to go back in a post-evaluation and see, did we have more symptoms?
Kind of forensically.
Yeah, and see if was every case associated with, upper respiratory fever, and was there runny nose as well, because that's not one of the main symptoms that is always communicated, but we can go back post hoc and see, because we don't know how long we're going to be working with this SARS-CoV-2 viral body. So,
well, like you've said before, you're learning too. We're all trying to gain more information. So one of the questions I think that we're hearing in our world is when we hear Pearl Harbor Week, horrendous, peak week, how does that affect us locally? I mean, are we on the same time frame? Should we be in that same mindset? Are we behind that? or do we just not know?
Yeah, so I assume that you're kind of referring to the Surgeon General's statement on a federal level. So nationally, we're kind of looking at I don't know if I feel comfortable with defining it as a Pearl Harbor moment necessarily, but at the same token, it's going to be a tough week nationally this week and into next week. Now, specifically for the state of Kansas, our major epicenters are on our east and west coasts.
Right.
And you can see over time, it's beginning to kind of find its way inland towards us. But right now, we're seeing about a 2 to 3 week lag that's consistent in terms of, the state of Kansas being affected versus, say, what we're seeing in New York. And so our week, so to speak, is going to be more lagged in terms of our expectation of kind of our steep incline. You hear Secretary Norman always talking about this Nike swoosh.
Right.
Our steep incline is probably going to be post this week into the tail end of next week. Especially for Reno County as well in terms of geography associated with our major metropolitan urbanized areas. We're about a week and a half off of Johnson County, Kansas City metro area. So my expectation based off of just kind of looking at some of the modeling is that we're probably looking at the tail end of this month into the beginning of May, for us specifically. Now the hope is that kind of how we led off this interview is that we're seeing some things just in the beginning stages that might indicate that some of the strategies that are being put forth at a national, state, and local level are beginning to have an effect. And I certainly hope we see a major compression as we move into the later stages of this month and into early May.
So just to kind of reiterate it from a pastoral point of view, stay diligent, stay at it.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
our best hope of mitigating right now. Is just to continue that.
I think if I could, it might be human nature to be kind of put into a false sense of security in that our numbers haven't been quote unquote increasing.
Right.
In terms of Sunday we had our 11th case for Reno County, 10th local transmission. I'm sorry, let me classify that statement.
Yeah.
Our 10th local Reno County resident,
Right.
not local transmission. That's confirmed positive. But I would argue that part of the reason that we're not seeing an incline, and thus you're not seeing a press release come out every day with a new number, is the strategies that we're taking are working. And so, but again, to your point, is that we have to remain diligent and steadfast in our strategies, because if we begin to loosen our grip on those reins too soon, then we might get into a situation, that double bounce, right, where we're trying to flatten this initial curve,
Right.
but if we go too soon and then we bounce again, then we're going to elongate this even longer.
Yeah.
And that's that's the needle that we're trying to thread, which
Right.
is a difficult endeavor to do.
Right.
So,
Yeah, and I really would reiterate, as the purpose of this interview is to encourage people that I love in this community to just really stay focused and steadfast, because if we do, we might be able to avoid some things that we really want to avoid. So in that vein, and again, I'm kind of responding a little bit to the national news and then what kind of questions that raises for locally. Don't go to the grocery stores, don't go to gas stations, and here I am saying diligent, and yet I'm asking you to clarify, because I've got some folks calling, well, do we go to the grocery store? Does someone bring us groceries? And I think in the past, I've heard us say, well, if you're of a certain vulnerable place, let someone bring something to you. Response to that?
yeah, so I think, the best strategies put forth is to limit absolute exposure, right?
Sure.
And so the best way to do that is if you were to never leave your house. But the reality is that's probably not a realistic endeavor for most of us.
Okay.
But if you have the capacity for somebody to, say, deliver groceries and go shopping for you, especially if you're in an at-risk population, aging or have significant comorbidities or underlying health conditions, if you have that capacity, someone's willing to do that for you, then that certainly decreases your exposure. That being said, we are seeing, in terms of just for the state of Kansas, we're seeing it nationally, but I'll focus on the state of Kansas. We are seeing a significant spread across age demographics in terms of contraction. And so some of the information initially that we had moving into this thing in terms of the at-risk populations of just simply kind of being the age, the older, elderly, and then those individuals' comorbidities, we're beginning to slowly see that kind of creep down in age. Mm-hmm. And so I don't think that the narrative maybe from 2 weeks ago, or I shouldn't say narrative, but maybe the presumption is that if I'm younger, that I can be a little more liberal with how often I go out. And I think it really pertains to each one of us individually, and that we have to do our best possible application of the guidelines. Okay. Just simply to not only decrease exposure for ourselves, but exposure to those around us. Yeah, and again, going back to your statement, that's the greatest aspect of kindness and love that you can express, and that your due diligence personally is not only for your own safety, but for those around you.
Yep, so. I agree. We really believe that. So mask, this may be a silly question, but
there are no silly questions.
There are no silly questions, okay. So now we hear we should be wearing masks, and I think my understanding is so that I don't spread it almost as much as, if not more. And if that's true, and I know it is, homemade mask. I mean, we've got folks in the faith community making masks for childcare workers, for homemade masks good? Something to...
Yeah. So, the Surgeon General, CDC, came out this weekend, kind of changed stance, and now it's a strong recommendation of mask use in general public. But I think it's important because I do think there's a misunderstanding or a misconception that the personal wearing of a mask is not to ensure your protection from others. Instead, it is to ensure and lessen the amount of you personally exposing others. You're actually protecting others by the use of a mask much more than you're protecting yourself.
Kind of like when I go to cough,
exactly.
I'm doing the same kind of thing. Right.
Again, what we know about this viral body and how it's spread is that it's through droplets and aerosolization. So it's not airborne, but it is aerosolized, and that's the micro droplets that come out of your coughing, sneezing, and in some respects, sometimes even talking. And so the wearing of a mask as a barrier stops from the projection of that aerosolization of the droplets.
Right.
And so that's the use of the mask. Again, because we're still trying to figure this viral body out, and so we still don't know exactly how long it lives in the air with someone who aerosolizes it. We still don't know with any kind of definitive certainty exactly how long it lives on surfaces. And so that recommendation for masks is a good one until we learn more about the viral body. Now, cloth masks, absolutely cloth masks for the individual lay person, perfectly acceptable. But again, it is to protect others, not necessarily yourself. Cloth itself is porous, and so it's not necessarily going to stop should the viral body land on your mask, quote unquote. It's not going to protect you. It's not going to stop it from entering into your respiratory gateway. But it is perfectly acceptable and better than nothing in a public sense. But again, I would advocate, because of the personal protection equipment issues that we're having in terms of the resources, that regular lay individuals do not use medical grade N95, K95, and/or surgical grade masks. And if you have those, please donate those to your medical community and first responders, because we are in desperate need of those. You should be okay as an individual with a cloth mask in terms of your utilization, but we desperately need those. Even locally here in Reno County, we are very, very low on our inventory, and it's a day-to-day, case-by-case basis.
Let me reiterate that and make that very clear, because I've heard that now 2 or 3 times. Just because we hear certain things nationally or maybe even statewide that there's all kinds of release of personal protective equipment, that's really not true for us in Reno County.
Right.
We really, they're gold. We really need to
Yes.
keep them in the hands of the people that need them.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. So for us as a state, and then subsequently as a county, but truly the state has exhausted its strategic national stockpile, and that strategic national stockpile is the inventory that's received to the state through federal mechanisms.
Right.
And we have been communicated that there will be no
Restocking.
of the strategic national stockpile for the state of Kansas. So until the federal mechanism replenishes that SNS or the strategic national stockpile, there is no federal inventory to lean onto. We are left to the inventory that we have within the state, and once that's out, we don't have a
A legitimate
a
backup.
fallback. Yeah, we don't have a fallback right now.
So everybody that's making us masks, keep making them.
Yes,
Because it
yes.
trickles down. It helps in other areas.
It does.
Which maybe leads to this question that I've gotten from several folks, and that is, okay, does that mean I need to be wearing gloves when I go to the grocery store? And I'm assuming that gloves are just about as valuable as the mask in
They are.
some ways. So this idea of wearing the blue gloves to go grocery shopping, I'm assuming we could wear a different kind of glove and protect ourselves. And
Yeah, so the aspect of wearing a glove for the individual lay person, say going shopping at the grocery store, is not necessary as long as you're taking the proper precautions to either sanitize your hands or wash your hands.
Okay.
The idea being that, if you're touching a communal cart, that again, we don't know how long the viral body necessarily lives on surfaces, and thus if you touch and then you're touching kind of these
Base.
gateways, mucous membranes, that's how we can protect it. But if you're just taking simple precautions to, not touch your face and you hand sanitize and wash your hands, then gloves isn't necessary for the regular lay audience. I will also reiterate that there is just as much of a glove shortage as there is a mask shortage or a gown shortage. I mean, PPE is kind of a general term that you hear all
Sure.
the time, but it encapsulates gloves, gowns, hoods, masks, everything. And the global picture, really, for everyone to understand, it is a global fire that is burning right now. And there is no blame in my statement here, but China had their fire before the United States. But also in a global economy, a mass majority of many of the protective pieces of personal protective equipment that we need is manufactured in China. And so as a result of both their own outbreak in China, in addition to the concerns of a global trade mechanisms and resources, there's shortages everywhere.
Yeah.
And so we're just as much dealing with a supply chain concern in our global economy as much as we're dealing with the actual
health issue.
health issues itself that we have within our own country, let alone on the world stage. So there's many moving parts that are all creating bottlenecks in this massive, pandemic.
Reconfiguration. Yeah.
And so that's as much as the prioritization of what states are being hit hardest in terms of the federal level has to prioritize where they send supplies.
Right.
At the same time as a nation, we're just simply not getting the inventory that we need out of the known manufacturing that has been offshored.
Sources that we used to have, we just really don't have at this
Right.
moment.
Yep.
So it's just
It's extremely complex, but unfortunately that complexity is
affecting Hutchinson.
affecting us.
Sometimes we get this idea that we live in Reno County and nothing like that affects us, and it really is proving that to
It
be
does.
proving that that's not true, right? That
Right.
all of a sudden the global reality of the world affects a local context. So we've talked about those PPEs. Questions that we're getting are things like ventilators. As things move, change in the national level, will that release enough equipment? I'm fairly aware, I think, that locally we're in pretty good shape from what I can gather, but you have a different take on that. Some of those fears are out there about, well, do we have enough ventilators? Do we have enough respirators? And What would be your take on that if you were trying to
Yeah.
help somebody?
So I think both as a state and as a county, we're doing the projections set forth. We're doing well in that regard.
Okay.
Additionally, one would hope that in terms of our peak hitting us versus our sister states on the coast, that we might
Right.
be the beneficiary of some inventory surplus that could be funneled to us if we need it. But at this point in time, both as a state, we're not necessarily having concern in terms of the inventory of ventilators and respirator inventory. And then even additionally, and I'm very happy of our healthcare system,
Yeah, me too.
that Hutch Regional, Hutchinson Clinic, and Prairie Star here locally within Reno County. I mean, they've been planning, they've been a part of this process from the get-go, well into the first of the year. And they've been putting and instituting in policies and guidelines and procedures that I think has put us in the best possible place that we can be in
Yeah,
response
yeah.
to if and when it hits us hard. So,
Yeah, that's certainly been my take as
Mhm.
I've listened to some of those conversations. Driving around's still okay as long as people do what they're supposed to do, get out and take a walk as long as they
Yeah.
stay apart from one another.
yeah, with the aspects of social distancing, right? So again, we don't want people to not get outdoors and recreate, and driving around is still okay. Although, I think a lot of traction locally in the media over the last week and a half has been over this new unicast data.
Yeah, that's where I was going.
Yeah, so this unicast data set, which it's an interesting metric, and I think I don't think we need to put all of our eggs. That's an Easter joke for you.
Right,
All
there
of
you
our
go.
eggs into one basket
That's
necessarily
true.
here. That I think it's a metric in the absence of nothing better to keep stock, but I don't think that the unicast data should be taken at wholesale in terms of, from what I can tell, in terms of digging into that data set and looking at the methodology for how they are aggregating that data. It's based off of GPS data from cell phone
Right.
Traveling. So actually, many of the apps that you have on your cell phone, you can opt into it tracking your GPS location.
Right.
Now, the unicast team has also identified essential versus non-essential locations on GPS mapping. And so the GPS data, as it goes to these essential and non-essential locations on your GPS map, that's kind of how they're creating those metrics. The challenge that I see, and I think some news outlets have begun to pick it up, and I'm of this thought that I did not see anything in terms of a robust control mechanism within that data set
Okay.
that differentiates strongly our metropolitan urbanized communities versus our rural communities.
Right.
Because if we're simply just measuring distance traveled, that becomes really challenging for a rural community, especially if you have your agrarian
Right.
Industries where there's no GPS location period within 50 acres.
Yeah.
And so an individual who, a farmer who has their phone on you and is going back and forth over 50 acres, I mean, I did not see that had been taken account into the actual methodology. So I have a little bit of concerns in terms of the differentiation between urbanized communities versus rural communities,
Right.
and just simply doing a metric off of that. Now they try to control for it in that data set by doing average change versus a one-for-one distance
Okay.
traveled.
Okay.
But there's still nothing's going to be perfect, and so I don't want to say that there's no value in it. I just say I think we need to use it as a piece of information that helps inform others, but we can't make decisions just simply based off
Yeah,
of
because
it.
I'm sure you've heard this. Well, we got a D minus. That must be
Yeah.
we're not paying attention. And when I heard you explaining that in another meeting, I thought, well, that's not necessarily
Right.
a good picture of how well we're obeying or,
Yeah.
or doing things.
And there is a lag to that data set too, which is
Okay.
a few, last I checked, I think it was about 4 or 5 days lag.
Okay.
So I think what we want to see is we want to see I wouldn't be as concerned with the actual grade itself, because the grade is just a grade in comparison to whichever county in the continental United States has the lowest amount of movement within their
That's true.
jurisdiction. So I'm not as concerned with the grade as I want to continue to see a downward trend, which tells me that people are moving around less.
Less.
Yeah.
Certainly.
So.
Certainly. Well, and I think I heard Chief Hooper make the statement that he thought there was less traffic in town, that they continue to see that
Yeah.
Go down. So if someone were to ask me if they thought this stay-at-home order was going to be extended into May, willing to read a tea leaf there and make a guess, or unwilling?
I think that's the million-dollar question that everybody is asking right now. You know, I don't pretend to have any kind of insider information, or there's no definitiveness to this answer. So this is simply me speaking personally in terms
Right.
of what I'm seeing. My expectation would be that the executive order will be extended past the 19th.
Okay.
Into maybe the end of the month. But with that being said, I would also say that my expectation is I would be very surprised if that decision is made before either the 18th or on the day of the
Okay,
19th.
so-
I think that's probably going to be a day of, if not the day before, kind of a call from the governor's
Sure.
office.
So stay in tune.
Yeah, I think we just need to continue to, as a public health industry system and healthcare system, we're monitoring literally on an hourly basis, and I know the governor's team is doing much of the same, but my guess is that they won't be making that decision till the midnight hour.
Late that. Well, that makes all the sense in the world. I think people's anxiety levels are, obviously, we're just trying to answer their questions. Anything, maybe any advice that you might have for people that are staying at home to, I've got a couple different questions in this vein, and that is, what advice you might have for people staying at home that might help them in that self-quarantine process, if you've got any personal advice there. And then secondly, any ways that people can help that they just don't know. I think one of the things that's happening for us is, how do we do something? I mean, okay, so we're trying to stay at home. Is there anything we can be doing, any way we could be making a difference from a health department point of view?
Yeah. So I think if I'm taking your question, and I think we're just as much talking about kind of the physical guidelines versus the mental health of this
Right.
entire
Right.
situation that we are living in now. And I think, I've seen and heard a number of kind of creative, innovative ways of leveraging technology, having game nights via
Right.
Zoom, or there's, someone was telling me about an app called, I think it's called Game Night or something
it
like
is.
that. Oh, okay. So
It is.
which, I've been told a few times just by contacts that I have, that they've had more game nights, and interacted more with groups that generally they maybe it would be a every other month kind of endeavor, and they've had 3 game nights this week,
Yep.
and so I think there are innovative things that we can do in leaning into technology. The other piece of it is going back to the aspect of, this is not a stay-at-home order in the sense that you cannot leave your house. And so one of the things I've just even noticed in my neighborhood is more walking happening within our neighborhoods. And one of the things that I would almost encourage and really get behind is the aspect of your neighborhood and your neighbors is taking a walk, and you see somebody sitting on the porch. I mean, you can absolutely just check in with them and have a brief conversation within that 6-foot kind of window.
Right,
Porch steps to porch, and there's nothing wrong with kind of that check-in. Again, I've said it, I think in a number of different venues, and I think I said it last time here, but we're social beings. And we can't forget that we're social beings, because an aspect of humanity is our interfacing with our brothers and sisters. And so I would encourage people to not feel like this is a sentence, and that you are being called to quarantine yourself in the sense of social isolation.
Sure.
as much as it's just certain guidelines to bound yourself to in that social interaction.
Right.
So we're just asking that maybe you refrain from the hug and the handshake, but you can still certainly have a conversation, much like we're having here.
Right.
And then, and soak up some of the, I mean, we had a beautiful day yesterday, a beautiful day, hopefully, I think in the weekend, it's supposed to get some bad weather, but anyway, you use this opportunity to go out and enjoy the outdoors and just simply interact with your neighbors, friends, and family. And I think those aspects of social connection, while you might not be able to offer the hugs and sit down on the couch, but there's still an aspect of that social interaction that's very important for us as social beings. So
I'm going to really underscore that just for those people who have been asking me questions. Social distancing does not mean social isolation, and health officer is saying that. And I think so many times the fear that's out there has taken the word social distancing to mean almost imprisonment within a 1,200 square foot home. And it's just as important for our health mentally. And I keep encouraging folks, talk to each other from a sidewalk. Make sure you make lots of phone calls right now, particularly those that are of an age. Make sure you keep them interacted. That's one of the main things I keep hearing. And Nick, I really appreciate you driving that home for us. Trying to remember any other questions. Again, just let me give my greatest of appreciation for what you and Adam's doing a fine job. Every official that I've had the privilege of working with, I know every one of them are just doing everything they know to do. County to county, a couple of thoughts come in my mind. County to county, state to state. Thoughts about that right now?
yeah, are you speaking in terms of travel?
Yeah, in terms of travel,
Sure.
I've got some folks that travel into Reno County from Rice or from McPherson County, so they travel in actually. And so the question becomes whether or not that is wise.
Yeah, so there's much more of from a public health perspective, a proactivity towards out-of-state travel versus in-state travel right now. Obviously, we have a few hot spots in our county in terms of the Kansas City metro area. Right now, and I'll make sure to clarify this. Right now, Sedgwick County is not one of those hot spots, although we are we are monitoring Sedgwick County very closely.
Okay.
But currently, there's no travel, inter-county travel restrictions based off of Sedgwick County or any of our surrounding counties. We just really, the communication that we've been having with individuals who pose this question is we're asking them, to exercise their best judgment in terms of why they're traveling and who they're interfacing with, both out of county and in county. But right now, there's no restrictions, and just using best judgment in terms of that inter-county travel is kind of what our stance is right now. So.
Okay. I don't have any more. You have anything else you'd like to wrap up? Your thoughts?
I just want to say thank you to you and your team for getting this information out. And again, it is. I know that it's trying times right now for everyone, but to the best of our ability as a community, as individuals, as a community, and quite frankly, as a state and a nation, the more we can lean into patience and grace and love in this time. I truly, I'm optimistic in terms of when this is all said and done. I think we're going to both learn things about ourselves, but we're going to be pleasantly surprised by a number of things. But that would simply be my call, would be to really just have people kind of have that heightened awareness to lean into those aspects of patience and grace right now, because it's in dire need for most everyone right now, because everyone in some form of capacity in their personal lives is under some form of stress as a result of what's happening right now.
Right.
And just not to forget that, and remember to just exercise some patience and make sure that people we interface with should understand that aspect of love for each other and for humanity. I think that's extremely important right now. So.
Well, I couldn't agree more to have grace for each other This is not a time to be divided or be evaluating somebody else. This is a time to, whatever strengths we may have, to give to those that may be weak in that area. We really are in this together. It's kind of interesting from my perspective. What I believe we in the faith community should have known for a long time is that we are one. And something like this has kind of proven that humanity is one humanity, no matter where we're at. So the area-wide churches are just so supportive of all that you're doing, and I hope if there's anything else we can do to help every one of them keep saying, well, whatever it is, somebody wave at us and let us know what that is. Can I pray for you? Can you mind if I?
Absolutely.
Father, I just thank you for Nick, and vicariously then I just pray for all that are working within the health department, within this local area, within our state, within our federal level, that, Lord, you give them wisdom and guidance. The Lord, as they continue to instruct us, that we would have hearts and minds to hear and to obey, and just to walk in grace with one another. Pray for their families. Pray, Lord, for all the hours they're putting in, that they just recover that strength and rest. In Christ's name, amen.
Amen.